Well, hi everybody, this is T. Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we continue our discussion on emotions. As I mentioned last time around, I decided to do a quick little Google search on the subject of emotions. And I think I typed in charts of emotions or models of emotions. And I came up with quite literally dozens of different diagrams where whoever has attempted to arrange emotions in some sort of way that in their opinion will be useful to somebody who's on some sort of quest for understanding their emotions. And as I started looking at more and more of these, I will tell you that some of them are very, very primitive, basic, almost geared towards an elementary school sort of a student, and others are highly sophisticated and come from very deep research and that. So our goal in looking at these models is to see if they overlay on the change grid. If the models do overlay on the change grid, how do they overlay? Once the overlay is complete, the question becomes, what does that model add to our body of understanding of the change grid? And then finally, what is it that we add to it? And so the goal of doing this whole discussion about taking models of brilliance and trying to integrate them is trying to just figure out, how do all these models work together? And again, should all these models work together? The answer is absolutely yes, because they're all trying to describe the exact same thing. In the case of this little set, they're all trying to describe the range of human emotions. And so while they might be coming at it from very different angles, and they might bring to their exploration very different levels of expertise, education, whatever, they're all attempting to describe the same thing in this, a human critter. So I think it's kind of fun to take a look at the most basic and work our way up to the most complicated, the most sophisticated, and see if we can merge them. So if you guys are all up for that challenge, I'm going to show you the very first model I want you to look at. And again, some of these, when you go to Google, you can see the attribution. So I just want to say to anyone who's listening to this call down in the future, if this model belongs to you, I'm more than happy to give you credit for the model. Happy to do that in the description of the program. But when I opened it up on Google Images, there was nothing there for me to really start off doing it. So I mean, no disrespect. I don't intend any violations, but you got to inform me if I haven't been able to give you proper citation. Anywho, so everybody take a look at this. And I do need you guys to play with this and kind of look at these little faces going around. Okay, they've tried to find some sort of graphic to communicate what this emotion is. I do have a wonder about tender over here being flat. By the way, I wonder if tender is even an emotion. So let's kind of just kind of look at the 6 emotions they've chosen to look at: excited, tender, scared, angry, sad, and happy. Now, underneath each one of those, they've got some adjectives. Again, a lot of these things that people are putting on these charts, I really don't believe qualify as an emotion. They're still valid adjectives. They're still useful descriptors, but I don't think they are in and of themselves emotions. So tender, intimate, loving, warm-hearted, sympathetic, touched, kind, soft. What do you guys think about that? Do those sound like emotions to you, or general adjectives, a little bit of both? And what do you think of tender as an emotion? I'm so glad I can edit out long periods of silence. So, okay, somebody play with T. Someone play with T. There we go. Thank you, David.
No, that's fine, T. Sure, there similarities. I mean, they could almost be synonyms, I suppose.
Mhm. Yeah, so they are useful, but I don't really know that this is what we would consider to be a sophisticated model
No.
of that. But yeah, and I look at scared. Scared is tense, nervous, anxious, jittery, frightened, panic-stricken, terrified. Okay. Angry goes from irritated all the way up to raging. So are these in some sort of progression? So I just don't think so. So, and again, I'd like you guys to all feel free to chime in on this, but I don't think I'm looking at something that was ever intended to be a structural map, an arrangement of nuances in emotions or anything like that. Like if I look at the ones opposite one another, I don't think that the opposite of excited is angry. Um, I don't know that the opposite of happy is scared. So I look at this, I just go like, I think someone just wanted to put together a cute little graphic.
Yeah, I agree, T. I don't, this is Kathy.
I,
I look at this and I mean, it's nice and no disrespect to whoever created it, but tender's not an emotion. It's a behavior. It's a, and
yeah,
I don't think it falls into the category of analysis or the level of analysis of the grid that,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Now, the reason why I put this one in here and maybe another one or two is because I want you guys to know that just because someone creates a model doesn't mean that it can be integrated because they might have had a very different purpose. And again, I think this one is purely for graphical representation of whatever we're going to talk about. I mean, we haven't even gotten into the fact that there are some very major groups of emotions that aren't even on this little pie chart. So just wanted to show you at least one where we can say, nope, that's not that. So, what do we do with it? We simply lovingly set it aside, which involves touching the delete key. So, all right, so let's take a look at this one. Now you've got a couple what do we say, vectors, I guess, a couple of continuums, because I think that confident and disappointed, frustrated and anxious, calm is in the middle. So calm is when happy, sad, angry, and afraid all come into balance. How many of you are kind of wondering whether or not this is, yeah.
I'm wondering, I have no idea what the theoretical background, underpinning of that is, of this model is. It's not apparent to me.
No, right. And if there was some sort of continuum that we're trying to look at as far as going in a circle around here, I would certainly tell you that euphoric is not a neighbor of annoyed.
Mhm. I mean,
Um,
calm in the middle is the closest it comes to where we are.
right. And the thing is that angry and afraid are both upgrid. Angry might be outgrid. Afraid is definitely upgrid. Happy isn't at any of the four. It could express itself in any of our regular four quadrants. And sadness sounds like grief, and that's more upgrid. So gloomy, somber, pensive, discouraged. And so I look at this and I also see they're going like, well, the lowest emotional level of anxious would be timid, and the highest would be terrified. If we're looking at their little pluses and minuses. So confident expresses itself on a range from pleased all the way up to euphoric. And by the way, if I said between the two words jubilant and euphoric, would you have put them in this order? Or it's like, you just go like, I need to look up what their definitions were for jubilant and euphoric. All right. And then frustrated ranges from a low of annoyed to a high of furious. So
But
again, yeah, go ahead.
it seems like there's describing the four emotions, this variation of the four.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was wondering too. It's kind of like, are they saying that our whole life is built out of four emotions: afraid, happy, angry, and sad? And I even look at what they've come up with for their little 6 pieces of their fan. Where is loved? Where is, yeah, I just don't know what the purpose was in the creation of this one, but are we in agreement that this one is also not a model that could be overlaid on the change grid?
Here, here.
Here, here.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Now we'll move on to the next one. Let's see if we're getting any closer. This one comes from the source, The Happiness Track by Emma Sapala, Finnish, quite obviously, mapping positive and negative emotions according to intensity. So
Okay.
now we've got low intensity and high intensity. That might just map to which of our dimensions?
Up and lower grades.
Up and down. That might be tension.
Yeah.
But negative to positive, that would not plot on top of the drive. Well, no. So, but nevertheless, I'm seeing something. So this might be useful in helping us to identify some upgrid emotions versus some downgrid emotions. But when I see calm, serene, and content, where on the change grid would you want to put calm, serene, and content?
Power.
Power? Any place specifically in power? Calm, serene, content.
In the middle.
It's in the middle.
Like right in the middle.
Right in the middle. That's where I put it. That's a PowerPoint kind of an experience. That's the goal if you're using this for personal growth in terms of spiritual development, finding peace, harmony, etc. So, okay. Now, if we can actually say then that this little part of the pie goes in the middle, can we place any of the other ones in other areas? So when I look at excited, elated, and ecstatic, would you guys like to tell me which of the quadrants you might want to eliminate?
Ingrid.
I don't want to be Ingrid. That doesn't seem to fly on top of Ingrid. What else? So again, we're looking
Oh,
at,
it doesn't seem downgrade either.
doesn't seem downgrid either. Excited, elated, ecstatic. These are all upgrade. Again, high intensity. And so where would I want to put these? I would probably put these, if I go to our energy map, elated. I mean, I'm kind of feeling a high degree of expressive energy for sure. Maybe a little bit of driver, but mostly I'm hearing stuff that would be more on the expressive side of things. Are you guys agreeing with me on that? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now you look at this next one, high intensity, negative, angry, anxious, and scared. Where do you want to put that wedge?
Angry, anxious, scared.
Angry, anxious, and scared.
Well, that almost seems like the outgrid danger zone.
I think it's definitely danger zone. Angry is an interesting one because angry occurs both very far upgrid and very far outgrid. Because I think you're at that powerless point where those all 4 of the good grief, danger zones come together. And so I think that's why we have angry at both of them, but anxious and scared are definitely both upgrid. Upgrid danger zone. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I go sad, bored, and tired. Sad, bored, and tired. Where do you want to put those? I mean, by their chart, low intensity, that would put us downgrid somewhere.
Downgrade.
Yeah. So I look at this and I go, well, this is interesting, but this is not a complete map. It's an interesting arrangement. And maybe by labeling emotions in terms of intensity and whether they are a positive experience or a negative experience, it's helping us to at least understand certain areas of the change grid better. But I don't really know that this is something that would be easy to overlay on the change grid as it is. We would have to dissect it completely.
I think what I'm having a problem with
Mhm.
some of these terminologies is almost, emotions are something that you experience and it's situational. And it
Sure.
almost seems like these, I guess you call them definitions, are almost like finality, like it only happens here, and that's not how emotions work.
No, in fact, when we do the adjective mapping, and I have the adjective map to show you guys as one of the attempts to plot emotions on the change grid, one of the things we say is that, to use your language, Brian, it is very situational. And inside of the change grid, every coordinate pair represents a different situation. So whatever is going on, we're still processing it through our perceptions of challenge and ability and importance and size, and its perceptions are all happening. So that's why when you talk about its situation, I go, okay, fine. In the situation of being in a feeling that your challenge was extremely high and your ability was very low, what kind of emotions might you expect to find? And I can get more pinpointed by giving specific coordinates. So
Right.
I do think that each intersection on the change grid represents a situation, but that situation could manifest itself in multiple scenarios, if you will.
Right.
So I could have a 9-9 experience, and it might be in business, it could be at home, it could be whatever. So there's no limit to the number of contextuals. No, or that'd be content.
Right.
Content. It's probably about
Right.
content, yeah, but the ratios end up
Yeah.
being, yeah.
Plus, two people can experience 9-9 quite differently. It's kind of like in the patient's room. So instead of asking like, how do you feel now? There's a range of different expressions. And so people can have the same diagnoses, but then you ask, okay, how do you feel? They're giving you on that scale of 1 to 10, they're giving you a different expression of how they're perceiving that particular pain that they're experiencing.
Absolutely. And I think that our definition of each of these coordinate pairs continues to change as our life experiences begin to add up. So what I mean by that is that when I was a child, if I had a 9-9 experience, I promise you that today that experience would no longer feel like a 9-9. It might feel like a 2-2 or a 3-3, but my life has gone on. I have a whole new set of 9-9 experiences because I've, gotten older, done more things, been exposed to more things, etc. So you guys can kind of see that how we define each one of these spots on our own change grid is going to change as we evolve as well. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why, your change grid is unique to you. But another way to look at this is that inside of everyone's personality, and again, we can talk about personality anytime you guys want, but there's enough of a body of knowledge to basically say all the arguments people could have, all the debates they could have about personality typing, what we know for certain is this: each one of us have a tendency to behave in predictable manners. Now, whether you can now move us into 4 categories or 8 categories or 16 categories, who knows, who cares? But I do know this: I do have a personality, and inside of my personality, you're likely to find a pretty high degree of consistency from one situation to the next, one day to the next, etc. But I know this much for absolute certain: I have a full change grid available to me inside of my personality. But each of you have your own personality, and overlaying on your own personality is your own change grid. And so that's another way that how we each define a particular location is definitely going to be different based on all sorts of different sorts of filters, I guess is how I put it, or contributing factors.
Absolutely. In fact, that's what makes our brain unique. When I see all this like this hacking of the brain and how they're trying to basically map out the entire brain. But what makes the brain so special and unique is how each individual utilize it. So it's like, how do you account for that, for experiences that haven't even taken place yet, and these kinds of things? And it's the same things for our personality. There's always room for growth and development.
That's right.
Part of the human experience.
That's right. That's right. So my final thought on this particular graphic is that while I find the spectrum between high intensity and low intensity useful. If you look at our layer for intensity, pardon me one moment. For us, intensity is at its lowest at 0, 0, and intensity tends to increase as we move further and further out grid. So that's our overlay for the intensity, but I appreciate that recognition. However, I believe that in, I'll say, the vast majority of specific locations on the change grid, we could experience a set of relatively positive emotions or a set of relatively negative emotions, and perhaps more often than not, a blend of the two. And so just because I'm up grid and I'm in a situation where I perceive my level of ability as being lower than the challenge at hand requires, that doesn't mean I'm going to be afraid. I could be exhilarated. I could be excited. Like, think about a roller coaster. Think about if you go onto a roller coaster, assume you're an enthusiast, you go onto a roller coaster and it doesn't stimulate a little bit of positive anxiety, a little bit of excitement, why would you stand in line for an hour to get on the thing? You know, you want the ride to somehow or another simultaneously terrify you, even though you know for certain that unless something freakish happens, you're in no true danger. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and if I'm out grid, let's not think for one moment that just because I'm out grid and I'm fully engaged and I'm executing and I'm at 9, 9, 10, 10, 11, 11, there's no reason for you to assume that my emotions are all going to be positive. Because even think about it, again, sports competition is a great way to understand out grid. Some people, when they're that far out grid in a competition, they actually want to experience some level of almost hatred for their opponent. So when I look at mixed martial arts matches, boxing matches, I'm not a fan, but you know, there it is. I just kind of go like, for that person to actually do that behavior, what is the emotion they're experiencing? Maybe there's some, I imagine there's a high degree of confidence, or they've done something profoundly stupid. So a high level of confidence, maybe a high level of arrogance, depending on who the fighter happens to be. But the way they look at the other person, you wonder, like, are you viewing that person as your enemy? Are you viewing them through contempt? You know, what's really going on that side of things? So I think we can find negative and positive emotions out grid. Are you guys, do you guys agree with me? Yeah.
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 I say that about the American football because
Yep.
the orthopedic surgeons, when I was doing rotation through it, they say the impact of getting hit like that is the equivalent of being in a car crash a day.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking in my mind, like, how do you psych yourself up to want to hit or be hit?
Right.
The coach.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, exactly right. Exactly right. Someone is, well, if we put everything we've been talking about in these past few series together, that coach's message is altering people's perceptions. It is awakening all sorts of emotions, which in turn is triggering all kinds of neurotransmitters, right? That's how it works.
Exactly.
And so they go out there, now it's fighting, you know, it's battle, it's whatever, particularly if it's team sport. So if I go down grid, I kind of understand that boredom is down grid. Is there some sadness? I think I could be sad up grid as well as down grid. So, but the sadness down grid is more like a depression sadness, where maybe the up grid sadness is more of sadness associated with grief. So but nevertheless, I'll say, yeah, there's definitely some negative emotions that we would encounter down grid, but there's also some great positive ones. And I'll be the poster child for someone who loves down grid because I like being quiet and to myself and withdrawn and all that. I find it very comforting. I find it very relaxing. I find it very whatever you really want. And it's beyond being in the center of the change grid. I'm just talking about sometimes the greatest way to spend a day is to do absolutely nothing. And literally, I mean nothing. Don't watch TV, don't read a book, just sit for 15 minutes and just do absolutely nothing. Don't meditate. Don't, just sit for 15 minutes and do absolutely nothing and tell me how you feel at the end of it. So it's a different experience, but nevertheless, you may very well find it to be quite pleasant. So
Put that on my bucket list.
yeah, well, and there are certainly plenty of people I'm sure we all know who are incapable of doing such a thing. What do you mean do nothing? I mean, just do nothing. Just do absolutely nothing. All right, and then, on the in-grid side of things, again, I think I can find both positive and negative emotions there as well. So, I don't need to continue to demonstrate it if we're all already in agreement. So depending on the situation, I may experience a positive or a negative emotion. And that could be pretty much anywhere on the change grid. I said pretty much anywhere. Put yourself in any of the 4 danger zones and tell me if you're more likely to encounter positive or negative emotions.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Probably both.
Probably both, but the further out grid I go, what do you think we're likely to encounter? And I'm going to bring up another diagram and see if this, and again, if you guys agree, we agree. But when I look at the powerless point, imperiled, terrified, arrogant, don't know if those are actually emotions, delusional, oblivious, unconscious. My thought is that I don't think I'm going to find very many positive emotions when I get into a danger zone. I think they're going to become increasingly negative, costly one way or another. Although I'm open to finding a happy one, I just don't know where it would be. Now,
I would think even if it is happy, it most likely would be quite distorted.
Well, and that's why I was looking at the upgrid, because upgrid, we certainly find there's some real excitement that could be going on. But in that danger zone, the negative ones come into play, because the happy ones, excitable, yeah, I think we're a little bit further down. Now that's going to be important in just a second if this ends up holding true. So go ahead. Yeah, Edie.
You know what? I'm just thinking of Carl Linda's family. And so when they're walking that tightrope, the challenge is pretty great. And there's this belief they have, but did you ever watch him?
Oh yeah.
When is that upgrid, outgrid?
Oh,
it's extreme.
Actually, he is as solid on that heart line of power as a person can get.
Okay. Because
now, I would say to you,
I
would say to you that while we might look at him as being like, okay, his ability is super high and he's doing something impossibly challenging, in his mind, he could actually be closer to the center of the change grid. I don't think it'd be a 6-6, but a 7-7 and 8-8. I wonder if sometimes when they're up there, they go into a mental state of detachment.
Yeah. Because he does talk about it's so peaceful.
It's so peaceful, right?
Like it is the center.
Yeah, and so we would kind of assume he'd have to be far more outgrid than that. But if I look at the adjective map and I think about emotional state and I think about things like having adrenaline rushes and all that, you guys tell me if, okay, for me to stay balanced on a tightrope, I have to have as much fluidity, as much, I'm going to say, the less tension in my muscles, the better. And I learned this in yoga, just trying to do something as simple as a tree pose. As your muscles tighten up, you tip over But if you could just relax everything, it's amazing how you can stand there just by, making the slightest little adjustments and that sort of thing. So, and I think that's what we're talking about for the Walindas.
Now, he's got to be close to the center of the grid.
He's
There's no
gotta
way.
be. He's
Yeah.
gotta be. But we look at what he's doing and go like, oh, this is a superhuman feat. And sometimes things go wrong. And when things go wrong, you better be sure he moves up grid, or the family moves up grid. They do whatever they can to correct it. But how often have we seen tightrope people deliberately wobble just to get the audience to gasp? It's almost like if during a performance they don't look like they're going to fall, we kind of feel like we missed something. So, all right. Anyway,
is that then one's perception and interpretation?
Yes.
When you're out, of the tension, is there that other factor? Like I was saying that, their perception of pain, I distort it to just being a neutral sensation.
Absolutely.
Is it somewhat the same, that it's their interpretation or perception of
Right.
the anxiety?
I think everybody is continually growing, and that means that their personal definition of each one of these spaces intersections continues to evolve. And so, and again, if we get into the advanced concepts of ChangeWorks, one of the things you guys have heard me talk about is that each of our personal change grids is nothing but a subset, a certain area of the grand change grid of life. And the grand change grid of life needs to have reverb behind it. The grand change grid. There is somewhere out there universally a massive change grid on which every single solitary possibility exists, and the extremes are expressed in the most possible extreme way. Well, that's not the life any of us live. So our idea of a 12-12 experience may be nothing compared to what other people might have already done in terms of a 12-12 experience, or a 9-9 or a 12-8 or whatever the case may be. So we're always redefining it. And isn't that the way perceptions work? So
yes,
our perceptions change. But just to finish off on the Walindas, I would say to you that it could be very dangerous for the Walindas to be too far out grid or too far up grid, because, and Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but adrenaline, epinephrine, these things are not helping you to calm your muscle tone. They're doing the opposite.
No. They're doing exactly the opposite. That's exactly right. Plus, it's turning off your reasoning capacity because it's priming your body for movement. So
that's right.
You're not trying to think in general when you're doing that kind of activity, but you do want to be able to have options.
Yep. And obviously that would suffer if they allowed themselves to be too far out grid or up grid. But they know their business. They're entertainers. They want to move us very far up grid. On their behalf, so vicariously we're experiencing what they're doing, and because none of us are foolish enough to get up there.
Well, the only way for them to control that, T, is for them to stay on the heart line. I mean, they have to be in control.
They have to be in control. And so again, I go emotionally, I think that they certainly don't want to be arrogant. They don't want to be any of those emotions in the outgrid danger zone, because that could make them overconfident, which could make them sloppy, take unnecessary risks, etc. So I think that when you're watching someone do something that's truly life-threatening, death-defying, you're watching someone who is exercising control to the nth possible degree. Okay, so now the reason why I brought up this idea about negative emotions being in the 4 danger zones is because then what ends up happening is that the change grid has what I think we've referred to in the past as either a function-based trend or a a spherical trend. So that would be something that is at one extreme in the center and at another extreme at the four powerless points, or the North Pole and the South Pole, if you're looking at it spherically. So I do think that's kind of what we're looking at here. In fact, if I open up this one diagram, so many layers, and this isn't even the whole set. Where are my circles? There. Okay. No, not you. Thank you for playing. Where'd you go? 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 Come back, be my friend. You. There you go. All right. So I think that as we start to move away from the PowerPoint in any direction, the range of emotions available to us is going to change. And I would think that the closer we are to the center of the change grid, the more likely we are to encounter the really positive emotions. As we move between the green line and the red line, maybe now we're starting to see a blend. So again, that roller coaster experience, let's say that it's a 2 for ability to 10 for challenge, or maybe you're saying, no, my ability is a 10 because I know I'm not going to die, but nevertheless, this is going to be thrilling. So, but you're at this place where you're going to have a blend of emotions, excitement, but at the same time, a little bit of anxiety about what's going on. So I think blend is there, but I think once we get beyond that red circle, we're going to start seeing the negative emotions be more predominant. And I'm saying it that way only because, you know, I don't have all the answers. This is the result of just combining stuff that we come across and see what meaning we can pull out of it. I can't think of very many really positive emotions that I would encounter in a danger zone, but I'm open to the possibilities. So if you guys can think of one, you by all means let me know. Now, I think that a lot of negative emotions could still lead to positive outcomes.
The only thing I can think of, T, is maniacal delusion.
Well, there is that. And so inside of that person, maybe in their moment, they experience as being positive, but all of us as coaches or clinicians or whatever, if you, as someone who said, you know, I have maniacal delusions, well, good for you. That's really great. Everyone should do that. No, we'd kind of go, you know, that's probably not something that you want to celebrate.
Doesn't it depend on how much time somebody spends in those zones? In other words, if somebody was constantly in the outgrid danger zone or constantly in the upgrid danger zone, that they might experience some euphoria because of the relevance and just the recognition of kind of being at home.
Yeah, well, certainly, you know, we all do have our little, now go back to that grand change grid of life. We all have a spot on it that we consider to be home base. And so absolutely, we know people, certainly we know people who live upgrid. Maybe not all up in the upgrid danger zone, but for them, every moment of every day is somehow or another stress inducing. And it's almost like they go out there and they create stressful situations, or they frame everything in the negative because that's how their energy is, what do we say, stimulated, revealed, the pot's boiling, whatever the case may be. So we have friends that I promise you can find negativity in any situation. So they're the kings and queens of yeah, but. Now, the outgrid danger zone, I do think we find lots of people that are in the outgrid danger zone. These tend to be the people who are, you know, workaholics. They might be accomplishing really great things, but at a tremendous cost as far as life-work balance is concerned, quality of their relationships are concerned, building any kind of a sense of or whatever. So this is the domain of narcissistic, arrogant, whatever the case may be. Yeah. And then certainly there are plenty of people who are profoundly depressed that are at the same time absolutely brilliant. And so that's what's happening. My might be happening downgrade. And we've already talked about the poor in-grid person who has really very little, if any, self-esteem and all that. So I think that anyone who's in any of these extremes are people who would benefit from intervention and rather high-level professional, guidance. Where when I look at people that are inside of the red circle, I go like, this is fine for those of us that are not fully licensed, psychiatric or medical professionals. We can do the coaching, we can do the guidance, we can do some of those kinds of things because our assumption is that we are working with a um, a generally healthy individual. They have no organic issues that we're supposed to be dealing with. And I think that in all the ethics training that we've all gone through, we know that we need to recognize when someone is outside of the scope of what we should be doing and when we should pass it on to someone else who can deliver different services. Yeah, you guys with me? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
'Cause I
So
think you can train yourself to be in those areas. Because like when I first came to the United States, I'm thinking about some of the countries that I lived in where, these are war-torn countries and they become desensitized towards violence.
yeah.
And
Right.
even when I came to the States and became a foster parent, and we would take these kids that ended up in juvenile detention centers and they were so-called gang bangers and stuff, and we'll take them into the woods for camping, a week camping. These guys, they're tough. They're inner city kids, and they're afraid to go to the bathroom at night because you have to actually walk to the outhouse. So they're not used to all the quiet, and they walk outside and they
Right.
hear like a brush of some critter or animal or something,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it scares them. Like they're
Absolutely.
afraid. They come running back
Absolutely.
in. So you take them out of their environment, the context in which they're used to operating in, and now all of a sudden they have to operate in a new environment, and everything changes for them.
Yes, it does. Isn't that interesting? Love it. Let me show you another little graphic and see if this kind of resonates. This one again, we've got, I think they're just using the word arousal instead of intensity. So when I look at excited, elated, ecstatic, does that mesh with happy? There's excited, alert, giddy, positive emotion. So I think this is just a rehash of that one we already looked at. Or someone found this and said, oh, we can do better. Let's make it a pie chart. So,
So is
but
this
then
happiness track a book?
what's that now?
The happiness track, is that a book? I see it said the Harvard Business Review there. Is that a book?
I think it is.
Ah,
Right. The Happiness Track by Emma Sapala. Fred, what's HBR?
the
Harvard
Harvard
Business
Business.
Review.org.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
why I
where
was
that one
thinking it
came
might be a
from.
book.
Yeah, but very interesting. Again, I wonder how it's used. So they obviously drew it for a reason, but it does not map on top of the change grid. So it's, thanks for giving us a few more adjectives. And I like this idea about that it's brought up about negative versus positive. Yeah. Okay. Um, huh. In which case, all right, everyone just kind of play with T for a second. The furthest upgrade would be angry, anxious, and scared, high intensity negative. Right below that would be excited, elated, and ecstatic. That would be high intensity positive. Then we'd have in the center, calm, serene, and content. And then move further down grid, sad, bored, and tired. So I could make this overlay, but I'd have to dissect it and represent it as a continuum along the intensity scale. But again, because we have those circles, or this idea about polar, North Pole being the power point and South Pole being the powerless point, I think that's what we're really going to be mapping emotions to. We'll see if that holds true as we work our way through a couple more of these models. Okay. So high arousal, low arousal, positive feelings, negative feelings. So far, that feels like what we've just looked at. But they've added this label to the outer band. So upper right is energize. Okay. And then lower right, renew. burnout at the bottom and stress at the top. So again, all those words they've scattered hither and yon might be interesting to look at, but I still think that stress band would go where?
Very top.
At the very top. Right below it, I would put which one's next?
Energize.
Energize. Right
Yep.
below that, but very close to the middle, I would put
Renew.
renew. And at the bottom, I would put
Burnout.
burnout, because burnout could be a combination of sad and tired. When I look at these, bored, lethargic, helpless, absolutely not. The person who's in the downgrade danger zone frames themselves as having very high level of ability, and it isn't very challenging at all. So if anything, I would want to move this one over to the in-grid side of things. Burnt out, miserable, ashamed, embarrassed, guilty. I would want to reorganize these. I don't think these are laid out in any sort of progression. Do you guys feel a progression there, or do you just kind of feel like those are 4 words they use to describe sad?
Yeah, I don't see a progression.
I don't see a progression. Okay, so, but I kind of like that idea. And by the way, I also like that they've used the word renew, because when I go to the center of the change grid, and we look at some of these things, touched, appreciated, loving, trusting, that feels a little bit on the in-grid side of things, actually. You're still in the center of the change grid, but lean a little bit to the in-grid side of things. And the peaceful, thoughtful, calm. I've never viewed placid as being a positive feeling, although I guess if we're just saying that's a calm lake sort of surface, I don't know. Placid to me always seems like you've disengaged, you're not involved, which does happen at the center of the change grid. All right. Okay. So again, thanks. I find this one more attractive. I find this one more useful, but I would still want to stack it along the tension continuum. All right. You guys, we're doing so far so good. You ready for another one?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. This one I have to bring in as a separate diagram. I didn't make a little slide for it. Okay, come on, open up. Be a good little diagram. Now, you guys might have to find this and download it yourself, because I tried to find a bigger one and I just wasn't able to find one. But this is the Geneva emotion wheel. So the Geneva emotion wheel. Now, to me, it's the same one we just looked at. So just one second. If I slide this out of the way, I think that's the same thing. So they've got highly activated instead of highly aroused. Pleasant, they've got positive. Calm, they have low arousal. And negative feelings, they have unpleasant. And as I start to go around it, though, I wonder if I have more of a feeling of progression. And so I know you can't really read all these well. And they're saying that when these emotions are at their minimum, you are in the middle where everything is neutral. Okay. So in order for me to, again, this would have to stack vertically, in which case the middle would still be where? Huh. Oh, well, let's take a look at some of these and go continuum. Do you guys think that pleasure and contentment could be neighbors? I say, yeah. Do you think fear and disappointment are neighbors? That I'm not so sure about. And if I go upgrade, are anger and interest neighbors? I don't think so.
Oh.
Compassion and sadness, those definitely aren't neighbors. So I don't think there's a continuum. Right? Now, why is it? Yeah, why do you think I care about there being a continuum or not being a continuum?
Well, the continuum is what your grid is it's based on, a
Right.
continuum of of situational experiences,
Yeah.
emotion, whatever it is
Yeah.
you're describing.
Subtle changes
Yeah,
in
yeah.
our perceptions. And I have to believe that at every single coordinate pair, there's going to be some set of emotions, maybe even unique, but I don't know if you guys remember in the adjective mapping exercise, we say like, whenever we plot an adjective, we're trying to find its epicenter. So where is its absolute center home base as far as that adjective is concerned? Where's that on the change grid? And then we know it's going to radiate out from there in a certain range. And some emotions have a much broader range, or some adjectives have a much broader area of impact, and some are very pinpointed. And so I think the same thing holds true when it comes to emotions, that some emotions might have very tightly confined fields of impact, and other emotions might have very large fields of impact. So, but there's going to be a certain place on the grid where that emotion would be of particular intensity, and then it would change as someone, you know, moves away from that epicenter for that emotion, or that, yeah, whatever. So I look at this and I go, well, thanks, but well, for some reason, because it's called the Geneva Emotion Wheel, doesn't it sound a little more substantial and you want to go look it up? You know, so why is that? Why Geneva could have been the person's name? I've got no idea. All right, I'm going to slide another one in here. Now this, oh, just a second, sorry. This one I found was interesting. This is one of the Wheel of Emotions prints. I'll slide it in. Oh wait, what's happening here? Okay, so Wheel of Emotion. Now this particular wheel has 6 emotions and all kinds of, oh, sorry, good grief. Come on, mouse, work. All kinds of emotions scattered all around it. So again, I wonder whether or not these emotions are laid out in any sort of a useful continuum. For example, I can see that sarcastic and judgmental may very well be neighbors. Hesitant and remorseful, don't know. Indifferent and inspired, no way. Liberated and energetic, maybe. Startled and scared, yeah. Shocked and terrified, okay. Ridiculed and embarrassed, okay. Hurt and humiliated, okay. So I can see how some of these kind of go, but I gotta tell you, can you guys resolve the border between indifferent and inspired? The border between bored and optimistic? See, it kind of falls apart right there for me anyway. Now, what was interesting about this is that it has 6 different elements that they want to look at. I'm going to show you one more. Oh, I keep doing that. If I slide to the wrong spot, my screen goes to sleep. I think it's this one. 1 moment, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No. Okay. By the way, that particular one, if I'm looking at the same thing, is the Junto Institute. Oh, yeah. Job. What does that say? No idea. So is that the same thing we were just looking at? Sad, disgust, anger. No, I don't have disgust on that. So there's another one. But look at this one. And I believe this one comes from emotional intelligence. And this one has, is it you? No. Is it you? No. Is it you? No. One moment. Where'd you go? Where did you go? Well, I'll show you in this one. This is just a little different arrangement of it. But this is a wheel of emotions that has 7. Oh, actually, no, that one has 8. And there's another one that has 7. Oh, man. So when we talk next, I want to pull these out because I think these have been thought through, developed a little bit more, more comprehensively. Oh man, I just need to stop moving my pointer. But that's what I'm really concerned about. Now, there is a couple of others that we'll be looking at. I particularly like this one. I'll make it bigger. Hopefully it'll still be readable. But they're going almost the same thing, pleasant versus unpleasant, high energy versus low energy. But I thought it was interesting they decided to show it as an arrangement. Does this arrangement, is there really, if I am, this is a 10 point, if I'm a -2 on the pleasantness scale and I'm a +3 on the energy scale, do I end up being nervous? I don't know, but I'm thinking, does this one overlay as well? So hopefully you guys are finding this interesting. Hopefully you're also appreciating how tedious this process of integrating models can be. Sometimes they're very straightforward. Sometimes you just go, what on earth are they beginning to talk about?
If I can just comment here, T, I mean, I think that, you know, the question you ask about continuum is really, really an important one, because I think that's the major difference between what you have done and what others to do. Most of these analyses are categories.
Right.
They are finite, discrete categories that may or may not you know, bleed into one another. I think that the wheel on the right probably comes the closest to having some relationship between the categories as they bleed into one another. But I think that notion of continuum is the distinguishing characteristic, and I think that leads us to apples and oranges kind of analysis here.
And see, and that's what I end up being afraid of, because that still doesn't mean this isn't useful. What's useful is that they've given us all of these emotions, which could also be used as adjectives. And the adjective map is something that we continue to try to evolve. But I just want to show this one. This one has 7 different wedges, and that one had 2, 4, 6, and the last one we looked at had 8. And so are all these really nothing more than nice little diagrams, or is there some way that they've laid them out that makes sense? Is the opposite of fear sadness? Is the opposite of surprise disgust? Is there any rule of how they decided to put these in the order they chose to place them in? Why do anger and happy have so many more available to them? So anyway, it's pretty interesting.
Seems like they're using the 7 or 6 emotions to describe behavioral manifestations. As Kathy said, they're categorizing it, but those are not necessarily the emotion itself.
Right. Right. Well, obviously there's more to discuss, so let's pick up where we left off on Thursday, and maybe we can put the category of emotions to bed. So with that, any final comments, thoughts?
That's good.
All right, good. All right, well, thanks so much for joining in, everybody. Talk to you later. Bye.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye for now.